All right, folks, I apologize. As you can tell, this is a new setup. I'm here in Lisbon, in our, Portugal office. So I'm actually streaming from my MacBook, and it looks like the configuration went bad, right? Like, so let me know if audio, let me know if we have audio right now or if it is still mute. All right, thank you, Diony. Glad you hear it. All right, beautiful. That's great. All right, so now, just like I usually say, you hear, right? Like Matt, Adrian, Odiuni, Brazil vibes. You guys have a priority in terms of suggesting topics of your interest to be discussed. Let me know. I was actually addressing here something from our backlog. Someone was asking, like about the D7 and the Golden Visa from Portugal, both visas like from Portugal. And, just to summarize, from the crowd over here, Travel Jones, welcome Travel Jones, is mostly about Brazil. So I'm going to be very brief on the comparison between the D7 and the Golden Visa. D7 is like the, passive income route. Very low threshold, $1,000 is actually 870 euros approximately, minimum wage in Portugal. And naturally, because you have such a high demand for the Portuguese visas, we naturally recommend that applicants have substantially more in both passive income and also in whatever income they have, like traditional, if they have assets, if they have a nice tax return. So this is going to be the upside of the D7, really low threshold. The main downside is that you would need to live in Portugal on a almost permanent basis, right? Like, so if you're planning, to come and go as often as you could do, for instance, with Brazil, you're not going to be able to do that with Portugal. In Portugal, you cannot stay away for more than 8 months within the residence period that you're securing. So first period is typically 2 years. You cannot stay longer than 8 months outside of Portugal. Second period, traditionally 3 years. Same thing, no longer than 8 months outside of Portugal. Now, talking about the Golden Visa, the main downside would be, naturally the money that you need to, invest or spend. You can, invest in funds, 500,000 euros, or you can also pick the donation slash charity route, which is like 250,000 euros. This is like the downside, if you will. The upside is that you don't have the same time requirement as you have for the D7, meaning that you can basically, invest and, just travel to Portugal once a year or even once every other year. You need to be in Portugal during 14 days every couple of years, right? So really low threshold for the physical presence. And these are the main highlights for those two visas. Oliuni, wow, I don't believe you, Oliuni. So are you in Coimbra? Oh, I can't believe it. Really, Oliuni. So that's so interesting. We are actually recording, we're filming in Coimbra as of tomorrow, right? As of tomorrow. So if you're still gonna be in Coimbra, I'm gonna invite you for, a cup of coffee. I don't know if you like Pingo Doce. I like, coffee. I like to drop by Pingo Doce and have some coffee. So if you are still gonna be in Coimbra tomorrow, Odiuni, I'm inviting you for a cup of coffee, and naturally, we're gonna, I'm gonna have someone, taking a picture of us to show in our next live stream. All right, such an interesting choice, Odiuni. So just, for those of you who don't know, Coimbra is a major destination in Portugal. Coimbra it has one of the most traditional universities worldwide, right? Like I think, Coimbra University has been formally around since the 17th century. It is something, like unbelievable, right? and it is such a great choice for people from all walks of life. Very often chosen by like D7, by retirees, by families with young children, right? Like a very well-rounded city, if you will. Nice sharing, Oliuni. All right, so let me take a look at our next question. All right, this is interesting. All right, so I heard that there are changes coming up for Brazil. I'm planning on, living over there with my partner. Should I be concerned, right? Okay, so for those of you who don't know, there was a new decree from actually this month. Like it has been in the works for a while now, actually since the beginning of President Lula administration. But this decree is addressing, most of the substantial changes. They are more related to the humanitarian visas, okay, not the traditional ones. And I think this is the good news, right? Because most of the current framework that we discuss here very often, the retiree, digital nomad, real estate investment, they were created or perfected by the prior administration, right? Like President Bolsonaro administration. So there was this kind of noise, maybe President Lula is going to undo what the prior administration created. But the good news is that, there was no visa that was kind of, like revoked by the new decree. The new decree is from this month. I think it is from the 7th or the 8th of October, right? So super new. I took a look. I didn't have a chance to read everything, but I can tell you most of the substantial changes, they are related to the, like refugee, type of visas. You also have, some kind of soft changes in terms of how the different levels of the administration in Brazil are going to work together for the benefit of immigrants. In my understanding, this goes beyond refugee stuff. Is going to hopefully be a positive impact for migrants, like under digital nomad, retiree, real estate investment as well. It means like more integration. It means more standard procedures across the Brazilian federal police stations, something that, it causes a lot of trouble. It causes a lot of trouble because, like, if I tell you something, this is how it's going to work. Many times when you visit the Brazilian federal police station, it works differently, right? And then naturally, there is frustration right there because then you say, well, like he said something, they said something, and happened differently, right? So there is a lot of discrepancy between different stations, and within the same stations, there is also discrepancy, okay? And so that's why one of the components I could identify in this decree is like the federal administration trying to have a more standardized procedures across the country, right? So I think it is like an upside, and hopefully we're going to see that materializing, all right? But there are also some provisions related to the investor visa, if I'm not mistaken, the retiree as well. So it's not just about the refugee, it's like about other visas as well. And I believe this is like the first meaningful creation of the current federal administration when it comes to immigration, and very typical of President Lula's administration. He's like addressing like those, like in need, right? Like not those with options, but those, like who are like fleeing Haiti, like fleeing, certain, war zones, and that's more like what the current administration is targeting. But again, Sometimes no news is good news, and my take is that no news on the retirement, the golden visa, the digital nomad is good news. All right, that's my take on it. Odiuni, I will be there. It would be nice to meet you at last. I will mail you after this live stream for details. Thumbs up, Odiuni. All right, that's gonna be a pleasure. That's gonna be a real pleasure, Odiuni. General Principle 25, boa tarde. Question about the Brazil real estate visa. After you do temporary residency for 4 years and secure the permanent residency, it is expected to spend most of your time in Brazil during those 4 years. General principle, good question. And the answer is typically Brazil would allow you to stay outside of Brazil for 12 months. Okay, so kind of very similar to the Portuguese approach. The Portuguese approach actually makes 16 in 5 years, right? 8 months for the first 2 years, and you can stay outside of Brazil or outside of Portugal for 8 months during the last 3 years. And for Brazil, we're gonna look at 4 years, and during those 4 years, you can, stay away for 12 months, right? So if you do the math, like Portugal is 5, Brazil is 4. They kind of are in the same ballpark. In general principle, Brazil does not care about how you spend this time outside of the country as long as you don't exceed the 12-month timeline in a total of 4 years, okay? So it could be like a single trip of 12 months, or it could be like 4 trips of 3 months, or it could be like 100 trips not exceeding 12 months in total. All right, and then if you follow the rule, at the end of 4 years, after you secure the residency, meaning, right, like the first day you're gonna use in your accounting is gonna be the issuance of your RNM card. Like 4 years down the line, yes, you can apply for the Brazilian citizenship. Don't forget that you need to communicate in Portuguese, right? And this is another subject. If it is of your interest, we can discuss a little bit more about that, about the language component. And by the way, we're talking about Portugal. Language component is gonna be there for either Portugal or Brazil, right? And I think it makes sense, because if you wanna become a citizen, right? Like, I mean, there is a presumption that you wanna, speak the language, right? So Portuguese is nice, because if you're tackling, Portugal and Brazil, Portuguese is gonna be helpful for both countries naturally. All right, Brazil Vibes Info, thank you so much. Brazil Vibes is buying me lunch. Mr. Oliveira, I am on the fence about the Brazil retirement visa versus the student visa. I qualify for both. What are the advantages of each one? Obrigado. Obrigado, digo eu, Brazil Vibes. Thank you so much for the lunch. Brazil Vibes is buying me lunch today. And so in terms of, like which one is going to bring you more benefits, Brazil Vibes, for sure, the retirement visa is going to be superior. And I can explain why. The student visa in Brazil typically is not going to, bring you, is not going to achieve anything more long term, meaning that you could study in Brazil for 4 years or 5 years. At the end of that period, you cannot apply for, permanent residency. You cannot apply for citizenship. So you are, let's say, in your immigration journey after whatever amount of time you've been in Brazil studying, you're gonna be back to zero, okay? And with the retirement track nowadays, is actually the opposite, right? Like, I mean, in just 2 years, you can typically apply for the permanent residency. And after you secure the permanent residency, just like we discussed here, after 4 years, you're gonna have a shot at the citizenship, right? So nowadays, we see the Brazil retirement visa as a very high-end type of visa, and the student visa is actually, it can let you stay in Brazil for as long as you study, but it never gets you anywhere in terms of either permanent residency or citizenship, right? So if you qualify for the retirement visa, Brazil Vibes, even though it is a pain in the neck in terms of the documents, the level of legalization you're gonna need to go through, the whole ordeal in terms of preparing documentation, presenting documentation, and after approval, attending the registration at the Brazilian Federal Police, it does get you on a very solid track for permanent residency and citizenship down the line. All right, congratulations for qualifying, Brazil Vibes. That's not for everyone. All right. And Matt Gaines, do you have experience or knowledge of the law firm Felsberg Advogados? One of their specialties is aviation, aircraft imports. Matt, I never heard about that, but that's just by what you're sharing, it does sound like promising, okay? Because if they specialize in aviation and aircraft imports, it looks like a kind of good match if that's what you are pursuing. Law firms in Brazil very typically they are all over the place, like doing a bunch of different things, and at the end of the day they're not specializing on anything, right? But if this firm, if they specialize in aviation and aircraft imports, it does sound like a very good first step. Another tip, Matt, is for you to check, like their licenses. Okay, they should have a license as a law firm, and whoever you're dealing with, they also should have a license, of course, as a lawyer, right? And then if you check the law firm license, you can do that on the Brazilian Bar Association website. There is like a federal bar association, and you can run the firm's name. And if you run the firm's name over there, you should be able to confirm that they are active and working. And like if they're active and they are, like if they have their license, like working, it means like they are compliant with their obligations. So that would be a something else that you can do, Matt. But again, it's not very common for Brazilian law firms to really specialize. So if you did find someone who specializes in this field of interest for you, it does sound like a good start point. All right, let me see what else we have. All right. All right, Matt is adding that they are a very large firm with offices in São Paulo, Rio, and Brasilia. It looks just like ours, right? Like, I mean, we are not a very large law firm, but we do have offices in Rio, São Paulo, and Brasilia. These are actually the three cities, Matt, in which we have offices nowadays, right? Exactly, Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and Brasilia. Yes, and that's typical, right? Like Rio and São Paulo, they are the most important cities in Brazil, for sure, right? Like first and second place, like São Paulo is just huge, right? Like it's the, economic engine of Brazil. Rio de Janeiro, no introductions needed. And Brasilia is the capital of the country, right? So very natural cities of choice for a law firm. But yes, it does sound like a good match, Matt. And like set up a consultation with them and see, how you like, counsel over there. It does sound like a good match so far. All right, what else we have over here? Okay, for Brazil, let me see one from Brazil. All right, okay, so this one is about cost of living, asking about different cities, about how much money you would need as a retiree. Yeah, uh, listen, it's very difficult for for anyone to put a you know an amount for how much you need to comfortably live in Brazil, just because the standards they are so different, right? And I think there is a budget and a city for everyone in Brazil. If you wanna, go fancy, if you wanna, live like in Rio de Janeiro, there are such great neighborhoods. There is Leblon. Nowadays Barra da Tijuca, has some amazing buildings. Really high level buildings becoming available in Barra da Tijuca, and like I mean, it is what you want, right? Like I mean, you could live in Brazil with $2,000 very comfortably. Probably not in Rio de Janeiro. Most probably like in the northeast of Brazil, and you could easily spend more than $10,000 a month in Rio if you want to, right? If you want to, like we have a transaction here at the firm is not a standard by any means. Is more like an exception, but it was surprising even to me, like the amount that this client of ours is paying in rent, right? And I'm not gonna say the price, I'm not gonna say the neighborhood, and I'm not gonna even say the correct number, but it was close to 100,000 reais per month just in rent, right? So we're talking about $17,000 a month in rent. Like he's paying that in Rio de Janeiro. Okay, so like this is like an outlier for sure, right? Like it's not something like in the typical, and at the same time, like we have clients happily living in the northeast of Brazil with $2,000 a month, not for rent. I'm talking about everything, right? With a couple of $1,000. So a very typical type of client we have over here is like veterans from the U.S., from the Army, from the Navy. Like they come, to Brazil with VA benefits, disability, retirement. They're making like $3,000, $4,000, and they can live very comfortably with that kind of money in Brazil. Now, in the United States, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you can live, comfortably in New York City or San Francisco, with $4,000 a month, right? But $4,000 a month in Brazil, particularly if you buy a property or if you pick like a smaller type of town, right, in the Northeast, like I mean, you can live a very very comfortable life. All right, so there are budgets for all types of people. All right, so that's what I have to share in terms of budgets. But if you guys, like those of you who are here, if you have a question specific about a city, I can share with you right away, right? Like, I mean, just talking here about Coimbra, just because we have Oliuni. Oliuni is here with us, and he's in Coimbra, Portugal. Brazil is a very good deal in terms of cost. Portugal, maybe it's an even better deal, believe it or not, right? It's in Europe, but the costs are, very suitable, right? Like I was talking about Pingo Doce. Pingo Doce is a supermarket chain throughout the country of Portugal, and they have this breakfast. Like you pay two euros and 80 cents for a breakfast, right? And you get pastel de nata, which is a typical culinary type of dessert that people here will have during breakfast. You have the pastel de nata, you have a croissant with ham and cheese, you have juice like orange juice, and you also have your coffee, right? So you have four items for 2 euros and 80 cents. And this morning I was testing like the exchange system, right? Like whenever you're using a card in Europe from another country, they are gonna try to sell you the exchange, and you should never get it because I don't know how this works, but if you pick the exchange, they always overcharge you, right? Like so, for instance, if I would have paid this breakfast in US dollars, it would be probably something like $3.20 or $3.30. But if I would accept the exchange rate offered during the payment on the card machine, it would be like 3.50 or 3.60, right? So interesting. But like even at 3.50, right? Like I mean, what can you get in the United States with $3.50? I don't think like if you drive by McDonald's, right? Like with $3.50, I don't think you can buy a sandwich, right? Like so, what you say about a four-item breakfast, right? And granted, right? Like Pingo Doce is not fancy by any standards. It is just because it's by our office, right? And to be honest with you, I like I am a more conservative person in terms of spending. So I say, listen, if I'm gonna have a nice breakfast for $3.50, that's my choice. And typically, food in general in Portugal is much fresher than what you would experience in the United States, right? Very comparable to what you get in Brazil. In Brazil, also, if you are in the Northeast, typically all the produce, everything that you're eating is going to come locally, right? So Northeast of Brazil and Portugal, they are at the same level in terms of the quality of food, very amazing quality. Okay, so there you go. All right, Rushama. I asked the question last week, but you did not have time to answer it. If I want to apply for my retirement residency from the US, does the health care from the VA would apply in that case? Rushama, listen, for every single veteran that I met so far during our consultations, they would have a health insurance that does qualify, that qualifies in full for applying for the retirement visa through a Brazilian consulate, right? And the reasoning, listen, I'm not like from the VA or anything, but the reasoning that I have in my head, and correct me if I'm wrong, like you probably know more than I do, but I think, like if you're from the Army, if you're being deployed all over the world, right, you probably need a health insurance that's going to have coverage everywhere. Okay, so maybe that's the concept. And when you kind of retire, when you are, no longer in service, they say, all right, now that he's no longer in service, we're not going to reduce the quality of the health insurance. We're going to keep as is. Rashama, my take is that yes, your health insurance will probably qualify based on my prior experience with veterans. All right, good for you. Trevor Jones, 4,000 is enough for a closet in New York City. Exactly, Trevor Jones. Yes, it's unbelievable, right? Like I mean, $4,000 in big U.S. cities. Like I mean, you don't do much with $4,000, and like we have just like we were discussing about budget, veterans, they also have a different compensation packages, right? Like VA benefits, like the Social Security itself and other things. So it does range, right? And I do see veterans making, sometimes 3,500, sometimes 4,500, sometimes 6,000. But if I had to guess, again, it's just a guess, I would say they do make an average, right? Like in terms of benefits, at least like the clients coming to us, between $4,000 to $5,000, right? And again, if they want to live in a big U.S. city, not a good match, but a great match for Brazil. and listen, why not Portugal as well, right? Like, I mean, that would be a great match for Brazil or Portugal. Okay, so there you go. Nice sharing, Interval Jones. General principle, Mr. Luciano, if most properties you like that you see are priced lower than your price target, are there other ways to meet the minimum requirement for the real estate visa? A general principle. So um, there is no a work around in terms of inflating the price, right? Like, I mean, I see this type of strategy being discussed every now and then. Like, well, can I don't know, say that it was 1 million, and then the seller would give me a rebate, or they would do some, construction. And my typical advice, general principle, is don't do that, right? Like, I mean, whenever people are hiring our services, like they want to, a high degree of certainty. We can never guarantee 100% success, but, so far we never had a real estate investor visa denied just because, we try to, work by the book, and we kind of shy away, like from clients who are not, trying to work by the rules, right? And I'm not talking about you. I mean, I know your comments, General Principal, and they are always on point. I'm just sharing others' experience, right? Like to answer your question. Now, there is a very typical strategy which we don't recommend, but we do handle here at the firm every now and then. Is like, you could buy 2 properties, okay? And so again, you're saying like price lower than your price target, you need to meet the minimum requirement. So what we do sometimes in the Northeast, right, particularly in the Northeast, because properties in the Northeast, they naturally cost much less than they would cost in the South, in Rio de Janeiro, Camboriú, Florianópolis, and so on. So what we typically do, we say, listen, if you want to buy 2 completely separate properties, probably our fees, they are not going to make much sense, because for us, it's just like we handling 2 totally separate transactions, right? But what we do for our clients is like this. Listen, if you want to buy, 2 properties for 350,000 reais each, guess what? Like, maybe we can match you to a developer in the Northeast, and then instead of buying a single unit for 700,000, you can buy 2 condos for 350,000 each, and this way you're gonna meet the minimum requirement of 700,000, and you're gonna get 2 properties, right? Okay, so that's a strategy you could consider, general principle. But if you're talking about completely separate properties, usually, right, the legwork that this is going to involve, like the amount of, like activities involved, is not really suitable, okay? But 2 units from the same developer, potentially even 3 units, right? Like, I mean, let's say if you buy in São Paulo nowadays, like we have, some entry-level condos in São Paulo for 300, actually 350, right? So you could potentially buy 3 condos in São Paulo for slightly over 1 million reais, and you could do like, short-term rental with all these 3 properties, have a really nice stream of income. A good thing about new buildings in São Paulo is that they have a specific share of the floors dedicated to short-term rental, okay? Now there is a whole new set of bills being introduced to reduce the short-term rentals in cities like Rio de Janeiro, Florianópolis, São Paulo, not surprisingly, right? And not Fortaleza. Fortaleza, I don't know why, like I'm still not seeing like traction. But Rio de Janeiro, like they're working non-stop on bills to reduce short-term rentals, okay? Like São Paulo, same thing. Florianópolis, Camboriú, all of those cities. So if you buy a new property, if you buy properties in a new building, typically they are going to have something that is going to be dedicated to short-term rentals. They say, you know what, like 20 to 30% of this building is going to be dedicated to short-term rentals, and the remainder is going to be used like traditional properties, right? So if the stream of income is something important to you, you may want to consider the newer buildings, because it's like you are hedging against prohibition down the line, right? Now, if you buy like a property from the market that was built 10, 20 years ago, they could very well like decide that they are not going to allow Airbnb anymore, and guess what? This would be enforceable against the unit owners, okay? And different countries, different states, different cities, they have different rules. But I can tell you that in Brazil, this is the direction that things are going. So again, if the stream of income is something key to your journey, general principle, make sure to buy in newer buildings. All right. All right. Matt Gain is Roshama. If you go to your federal military insurance provider web page, they will list overseas providers. I have looked across federal and numerous facilities in Brazil take the insurance. Nice sharing, Matt. That's a good tip. Yes, and whenever applying through a consulate, Matt and Roshama, you're gonna need to present evidence of the coverage, which is not difficult, to be honest with you. Is basically provide first a summary of the health insurance that you have, and then you also gonna need to present the service terms showing that you have coverage. You have coverage in Brazil, all right? And for those of you who are not familiar with this whole discussion, travel insurance does not qualify. Very interesting. Travel insurance is going to qualify for Portugal as long as they would repatriate your body in the event of death. But Brazil does not accept travel insurance. Brazil asks specifically for health insurance, right? Like very typically specifying health insurance. Now, if you ever see someone saying, well, I have a friend, he went over there with travel insurance and he was accepted. Yes, we heard a few cases like this, but this is more like an exception, okay? And there is a certain degree of variation in terms of officers, Brazilian, immigration officers working at the consulates. They may have different standards, or sometimes they're busy, or maybe they cannot tell the difference, right? But I can tell you, that as a general rule, for you to apply for anything meaningful, right? Like in terms of visa at a Brazilian consulate, you're gonna need like the health insurance with coverage in Brazil. Actually, even for the digital nomad, which is a very entry-level type of visa in Brazil, you're gonna need health insurance with coverage in Brazil to apply at a consulate. And again, if you apply in Brazil, then you don't need that, all right? There you go. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Very interesting comments. I'm gonna be waiting for a message from my friend Oliuni. See if we're gonna have some coffee tomorrow in Coimbra. It's gonna be a pleasure to meet Oliuni. All right, and maybe take a picture so we can share here in our community next week. Very happy to meet you guys, and wishing you a blessed rest of your Wednesday. Beleza. Nossa.